All right, hello. Thank you all for having me, and I'm very cognizant of the fact that oh, uh, we can cut the video. I'm very cognizant of the fact that I am the only thing standing between you and lunch, and since we're not all AI yet, we're replaced by AI. Lunch is still very, very important. I will introduce my chief of staff, Andrew Bussey, who has been with our company for 6 years. He's going to help me with some demos and slides. So say hello to Andrew. My session is really going to be about making AI real in your companies. I think there's been a lot of really great discussion about the philosophy of AI. I think the depiction of the different, cartoon illustrations of what could AI be from Tim were both like a little, disturbing, and then also like I think very interesting. I'm also kind of very stuck in now the mental model of my brain being filled with like cheese curds forming of knowledge from Noah's session. But all that is to say, our big focus as Airtable has always been about making apps real and making them buildable by people exactly like you. And I think AI has been a really, really exciting thing for us. One, because I've personally been, tinkering around with AI from even, my college days, playing around with neural networks back in like, the 05, 06, 07 timeframe. Things were very, very primitive at that time. Like, you could use AI to do very, very simple things like text extraction or maybe some like basic classification, sentiment analysis, that kind of thing. And I think really since then, over the past 20 years, what we've seen is more than just incremental improvements, but real kind of profound unlocks in what you can do with AI. And so our entire focus as a company is going to be about making these things real and making them operationalizable for you. So today is not about how things will be, but how things are, and what we're actually already seeing from our customers. We've had an AI beta program for about a year, and we just launched our AI features out of beta into full GA a couple months ago. And even during the beta, we've worked really, really closely with 1,000+ customers in actually deploying real AI use cases into their orgs, and often within marketing orgs. And actually later today, one of our customers from Amazon Web Services, Jonathan, is here to talk about the kind of very systematic and innovative way in which he has gone through AWS's marketing org and transformed piece by piece their operations with AI on Airtable. Next slide, please. So just a very, very quick recap of how I see AI and the progression. So, going back, this actually only goes back to 2018. I think back to like even 2005 and so on. That was really, I think, the beginning of an inflection in AI becoming really, really potent and really capable on a broad and deep level. So, if you go back to like the 2010 or 2012 era models, these models were really good at very narrow applications, right? So again, sentiment analysis. There was a big breakthrough in something called ImageNet. So the person who now leads AI at Facebook or Meta, Jan LeCun, basically created a lot of pioneering technologies around what's called ImageNet. It kind of pioneered this novel application of AI, and in some regards, like kind of set off this renewed interest in AI. Because as Noah said, some of the basic concepts behind AI, neural networks, et cetera, have been around for many decades. Like literally, these things were talked about in the 60s and 70s. Because I think the theoretical allure of, hey, what if you could teach a computer not by telling it programmatically and in a very prescriptive way what to do, if this, then that, type statements. What if you could just train it on real content, real data, and have it figure things out on its own, right? That sounds like quite magical. And frankly, as somebody who programmed a lot and in the founding of Airtable, it'd be really nice not to have to code out every single step that you want your apps to do, right? So I think that's been a really, really exciting breakthrough. As we look at the progression, even over the past 5 years, we really have reached this thing that looks like Moore's Law, but kind of on a let's say a PC version of some kind of very enhancing drug, right? The models have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And as that has happened, it's not just that you get incrementally better capabilities, but really that you've been able to get real breakthroughs in what these models are capable of. And of course, we've already heard today about some of those really kind of profound breakthroughs. But the way I think of it, actually, if you go to the next slide, is it's not just about getting more, kind of some kind of CPU capacity or some kind of a benchmark on the MMLU, the SAT equivalent for AIs, But really, the way I start to think about it is in the past, AI was good at very, very narrow applications, and you couldn't even really compare it to like a human doing work, right? Because it was very narrow, very, very purpose specific. And what you now have with LLMs, especially the largest LLMs, and the most potent ones, is that you're actually able to automate human tasks that might have taken 5 seconds, right? These AIs, as we've all seen with ChatGPT, they still get kind of stuck. And yeah, you can do things like few-shot prompting, like Noah talked about, other techniques like chain of thought reasoning. There's a lot of work being done around things called agents. One kind of demo example of this that kind of made a breakout within the tech and AI community last year was called AutoGPT. You can look up YouTube videos of this and tell AI basically, hey, like help me design a business that can generate hundreds of dollars of profit per day. And you see the AI kind of like breaking it down into different steps, like, okay, what's a business? Like, how do I create profit? Like, how do I start? How do I get money to start my business? And it's kind of like a little bit comical because it's kind of like a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old going out and trying to figure out like, with a million whys, how to do something very, very broad and complex, right? And the kind of really key thing is inevitably these AIs get stuck along the way, right? Like they kind of go down a rabbit hole and like, they never actually get to the point where they design like an awesome, $100 profit business per day, right? And I think that's because these models are getting better and better, but they're still at the point where they're really capable not of like broad human intelligence. And I think, that's going to be a long, long, long way off. And instead, the way to think about it is it's not deterministic programming. So it's not just narrowly applicable, predictably applicable to very specific tasks, but really it is capable of very broad and even creative or strategic reasoning, but on a smaller time scale than what a human working for many, many hours or many days could solve. So as we've gone through the different eras of these really large language models compressed into just a few years, I mean, this is kind of incredible, right? Like if imagine the days of processor, kind of wars between Intel and AMD, and like every 18 months you got a twice as fast processor, and it was awesome because you could do more things like, open up 4 tabs on Internet Explorer instead of 1, or play games that were more realistic. This is happening on an even more compressed timescale in AI. These models are getting dramatically bigger, better, and actually unlocking more advanced human reasoning. And I think this is really important as a mental model for how to actually use AI in a practical way, because next slide, the way to think about it is it's non-deterministic. It's, as Tim talked about, like you have to try sometimes experimentally asking the AI to get you what you want, right? We just saw some examples of, hey, if you try different prompts, you can get different types of image outputs, and it may not give you exactly what you want on the first try, but if you kind of probe around with it and give it the right data, the right context, and eventually integrate it into a useful workflow, it actually can be really, really valuable, right? Because unlike a human, the AI never sleeps, right? You can have it on all of the time, even if it's only a 50-second or a 5-minute human task. The fact that it can do it on demand in a recurring workflow way and potentially scalably up to 50,000 or hundreds of thousands of different kind of work items all at once, that's the real power of it. So I'm very aligned with, I think, Tim and Noah in that, let's not think of this as either on one extreme, just, a complete replacement of humans, nor on the other extreme, is it just narrow kind of, traditional programming. It's actually something very different, which is something that kind of approximates human intelligence, but in very, very small chunks. And that's going to be the right paradigm to think about it for a very long time in my strong belief. And so the best way to get value out of it, next slide, is really around having humans not just in the loop with AI, but controlling the loop. So, when human, next slide. So Airtable as the no-code app platform that allows you to build your own apps very quickly. And as we saw briefly on the previous slide, we've seen a lot of traction, a lot of scale. We've raised 1.4 billion of capital. We still have $1 billion in our bank account and growing now that we're profitable. But the reason we've gotten to this point over the past 12 years is because we really, kind of have, I think, tapped into a really unmet need, which is companies need more and more apps. They need those apps to be very tailored to specific business use cases. We can talk more about marketing specific use cases, but but they need those apps to be extremely fluid. The way that marketing is changing, and I've spent a ton of time with CMOs of leading retail companies, of tech companies, of financial services companies. the pace of change is so fast, and AI is only accelerating that pace of change, right? As you have to adapt to more personalization, more content creation, et cetera. And so, having a very flexible approach to building out these use cases that kind of maybe ironically or very appropriately use AI to automate the operations that are themselves being disrupted by AI, I think is entirely, kind of inevitable. And the real challenge is, with these AI capabilities that need to be thought of in this new way, you really have to be able to experiment with it. And if you go to the next slide, the way I see the landscape is you have AI chat products. So we've all seen ChatGPT, what it's capable of, and that's great. It's like basically a kind of a chat wrapper around these models. But the business impact is limited, right? I mean, it's chat, and so you can't really do it in a recurring, automated way. It's not integrated with your data. It's kind of just there as a one-off, almost like a toy. On the other hand, you have very custom implemented AI. So we've definitely worked with a lot of large enterprises that are actually going out and building very heavyweight implementations of their own AI, right? Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan has publicly talked about having thousands of developers now focused on building their own AI infrastructure, building applications on that AI, and ultimately deploying extremely high cost, but also extremely high impact AI use cases into their enterprise. And I think that's a totally viable approach. In fact, like maybe necessary at some of the largest companies. However, you can only solve few and far between use cases with that very heavyweight approach. And on the other extreme, you have products, right? I mean, Slack has an AI feature, and Zoom now has one, and you can turn on these features and get some kind of summarization or some kind of automation step in AI. But these are also kind of pretty narrow. They're not kind of fulfilling the ultimate promise of what AI can do within all of your marketing operations within the enterprise, right? And so that's really where we see no code playing a massive role, because no code is by definition the way that you can build your own apps, tailor to your own operations, your own data model, your own workflows, and ultimately iterate on those as you experiment with what AI is capable of automating along the way. Because if anybody tells you they know exactly what the right way to implement AI into your operations are, they're full of it. Because even the researchers who are coming up with these models, I mean, if you look at the some of the papers that have been talked about, Noah mentioned the MedPrompt one from Microsoft Research. There's a different one called Sparks of Artificial Intelligence, which basically was also published by AI researchers, very close to the state of the art of these LLMs. Actually, kind of noting how surprised they were at GPT-4 coming out and having these real unlocks in what it was capable of doing, right? So in a way, these are emergent capabilities of the AI. I personally think that as we get bigger, more advanced models, and even once you've trained it on all of the internet, all books ever, there's even more ways to advance these models' capabilities through things called synthetic data, where basically you're generating data, and then training the AI on that data. There's other techniques out there that will continue to improve these AIs, but they will start to continue to exhibit more and more human-like behaviors along the way. And so really the only way to keep up with this is to have an approach where you're able to experiment, because nobody really knows what these AIs are capable of, especially with every successive generation. GPT-5's coming out soon. There's going to be surely, Google and Anthropic and other players, open source, kind of options that mirror its performance. And the only way to figure out how to apply it into every part of your organization is to experiment. But the three principles that I'd leave you with, whether or not you use Airtable, first, to really make AI valuable, you have to embed it into the context of your data and your workflows. Again, this is why chat is fun as a toy and maybe as a one-off way to do, kind of certain tasks in a very ad hoc fashion. But ultimately, our strong belief is that to really maximize and fully utilize the value of AI, you have to embed it into the way that people are working on a recurring level. And you have to take out all the guesswork every time of them having to figure out, how do I prompt this chat experience to get what I want? It can just be built in to a recurring workflow. The AI prompts can actually be codified by somebody who built them within your company, who understands your data and your process and can kind of do that experimentation with prompting to figure out, how do I get this to do what I want, right? So that's number one. The second is you have to build this culture of experimentation. So there's no way to develop a truly first-class AI implementation without actually experimenting. Because as we've seen from earlier today, the prompting itself needs experimentation. As the models get better and better, they're going to unlock new capabilities. The way you prompt them might actually evolve and get easier. And so you have to constantly adapt and iterate to stay on top of it. The good news is the upside is profound, and we're already seeing our customers get massive, massive unlocks in time savings or impact to their revenue or their performance because of AI. And then third, and finally, this idea of chainability is really, really important. So AI on its own is kind of cool, it's powerful. AI, when combined with both additional AI steps, so in Airtable, you can set up an AI step that produces one output, have a human review that, then have that chain into a different AI prompt, right? And have that generate an output. And then expose that through an integration in Slack or in an email, or put that back into either Airtable or a Salesforce record, whatever you want, right? And so the idea of making AI truly this fluid tool at your disposal that you don't have to use as a one-off, but you can integrate very, very deeply. It's just almost like water. You got to put it into every single part of your operations in a very, very fast and fluid way. I think that's going to be critical to getting maximum value out of AI. And now, without further ado, let's actually see a very, very brief demo of what this looks like in practice.
Can you hear me? Let's do it. Who's excited for a live demo? Woo. Yeah, I know, right before lunch. Okay, so I'm gonna set the stage quickly on the business context. So as Howie alluded to, this is inspired by one of our global media customers with a large portfolio of podcasts. They launch about 50 podcasts every single month, so the scale is really high. For every podcast, there's a ton of episodes, and for every episode, there are ad spots. So think about like mid-roll ad reads by the host. And I'd say that's core to their business, though, is this ability to match, pitch, and deliver ad spots to sponsors. So really the right ad for the right sponsor. This customer requires relevant, tailored, cost-effective sponsor pitches at scale. The success has direct impact on the revenue. You ready to jump into the workflow? So we are actually in an Airtable app right now. This was all built in 2 hours, one weekend. So this is how quickly you can spin things up in Airtable. If I go to my podcast portfolio, I can see all the podcasts. This is all fictional. This is actually all generated with AI here, but we can assume that this is our portfolio of podcasts. I can scroll down, click into any podcast. I have a soft spot for Conan, so let's look at Conan. We can see the description of the podcast. We can see what their genre is, the audience. I can click into the host, amazing headshot. We can see what their personality is like, animated, energetic, humorous. If anyone saw the Hot Ones interview with him, those are definitely on point. And so really what I'm trying to show you here, though, is that we already have all this structured data around the podcast, around the host. We have all these attributes that are going to feed into this relevancy for how we're pitching to sponsors. So let's look at the other side of this equation, right? We have, as a rep for this company, I want to go out and pitch these sponsors. I've already placed quite a few ads with some pretty large brands here. If you see your brand on here, don't worry, this data is all just made up. It's all fictional. Maybe I got it right, I don't know. But the idea is that the rep might already know some of the campaigns that exist for these sponsors or have insight into what's upcoming in the campaign. So let's click into Pepsi. The PepsiCo Refresh Fest, and it explains that it's designed for our youth market, aiming to boost brand engagement. The campaign is active, and we've actually already placed a few ads across these different podcasts here. So the idea here is now we're looking at this other side. Even if we have the attributes of the podcast host and the podcast itself, now we're looking at what the description is for the sponsor and how can we tailor our pitches to this description, to this specific campaign. So I'm the rep. I'm going to go look at the open ad spots of what's coming on our calendar. I see that Conan O'Brien has an episode with Will Ferrell. We have a pre-roll 60-second ad that's available. I'm going to scroll down, and so now I can see everything in one place. The episode information, this podcast with Will Ferrell, all the stuff we saw about the podcast. It's a comedy. Here's a description. And once I clicked this Get Campaign Matches, this is where AI can be infused directly, embedded directly into your workflow. It's now looking at that entire list of sponsors that we just looked at, and it's giving me a recommendation, a suggestion of 1 to 3 campaigns that they think is fitting well to this specific podcast, to this specific episode. So we can see that the PepsiCo Refresh Fest, which we clicked in earlier, comes up for this one and says, hey, this vibrant, energetic tone aligns well with the comedic and lively atmosphere of a podcast hosted by Conan O'Brien. Great. We also have one from Nike here. So what I'm going to do, let's go with Nike. I think that one might be funnier. So it's a summer sports challenge. I click on the campaign. Hopefully this gets going. I'm going to click Conan O'Brien as the host. Fun of live demos. See if this works. Okay, so I clicked on the campaign. It fills in the description. I click in the reader. It's Conan O'Brien. And so now what this prompt is doing, as Howie was just showing in the previous example, we now have a prompt here down at the bottom to generate a script for this specific pitch to this sponsor, Nike. So it's taking in both the podcast information and it's taking in the sponsor information of what their campaign is, trying to put it into the voice of Conan. You could imagine that we could even do this across a menu of options for the sponsor. So not just Conan, but if there's a podcast that has multiple hosts, we could show it in each of the host voices. We could even show different readers. And out comes an amazing ad spot script from Conan. Now you know me. I'm not exactly what you call an elite athlete unless you count my legendary moves in the highly competitive world of late night host chair swiveling, right? So it's taking his more comedic, animated, humorous tone, pairing it with the Nike campaign, and now we can package up this pitch, deliver it right to Nike. So we could stop there. That would be great. It would solve a lot of the business objectives of this company. But we can actually take it one step further. And now that we've actually generated, pitched, and delivered these ad spots, we can actually see what the past ad spots, how well they performed, and how well and how accurate the hosts were for what that script was. So now I look at some of the past episodes. I can see Conan O'Brien had one with Jerry Seinfeld. I can click into what that ad read looked like. On the left side, we can see what the AI script told Conan to read, or what we all agreed upon was going to be the script. And then we can actually have the transcript from that podcast, and we can measure what was the diff between those two. In this case, if we scroll down to the summary, which is also AI generated, that's comparing these two values, we can see that the accuracy score is 100%. The transcript for the ad spot read by Conan O'Brien is word for word accurate to the original script. There were no deviations. Great. I think it gets more interesting when they do deviate, which Conan O'Brien tends to do. So if I click into this ad spot, if I go down and I look at the script, we had a campaign for General Motors Drive Forward Festival. I think that might be made up. It's an exhilarating nationwide campaign. And we go down and we see on the left side again what the script was that we pitched to GM, that we all agreed upon, that we handed to Conan O'Brien. And if we look on the right side now, we start to see, well, first of all, it's a way longer. We start to see some variance from what was handed to him. So right off the top, instead of, hey there, friends, Conan O'Brien here, we say, hey there, amigos, Conan O'Brien here, and goes into his ad lib tendencies. And so now when we go down to this ad read summary, we can see the accuracy score is 75. We get a summary of the key points that he missed from the original script, which might have been important for the brand, but we also see new points that he added that were not in the script at all. And really, probably most importantly, what is the impact of this variance for the intended audience? And so what this summary is saying is that, hey, it's a more relaxed, humorous tone, which is likely to resonate, but at the same time, the informal tone and slight deviations from the script might slightly alter the perceived professionalism or seriousness. So this is the type of feedback and input that we want to understand as we're going on and pitching new sponsors. There might be some sponsors that need that script to be word for word. There might be other ones that enjoy this type of ad-libbing and making it their own. So what we just saw, to take a step back, we had new podcasts. For every podcast, we had these ad spots. We were trying to find relevant sponsors so we could pitch and deliver these ad spots. After delivering it with AI, we can then look at the transcript and compare how well the host delivered that transcript versus what the script we first set.
Thank you, Bussy. And more importantly than the specific use case here is the fact that It was built in 2 hours. This is a very, very simplified prototype or kind of a proof of concept, roughly modeled off of some realistic use cases we've seen with our customers. And B, this is something that you can completely experiment with, right? So we could literally give you a copy of this base. You could then go and experiment with the prompt, the workflow, the data, and get different results, right? You could tune it to get different host read generations, et cetera. And so the real emphasis here is that you are all going to be the heroes of this AI transformation because you have the power to go and experiment and figure out how to utilize AI in every single step of your operations. And these steps can actually be pretty profound, right? In this use case, like if you can go out and pitch these sponsors with a pre-generated example of what would it actually sound like if Coca-Cola had their new campaign, kind of placed in the Conan show, right? And to see that up front instead of saying, well, here's the CPMs and, like Conan's a great brand, blah, blah, blah. Like, what if that drove millions or tens of millions of more dollars of sponsor deals, right? So ultimately, massive, massive upside, very much worth the experimentation. I think now is the time. It's not in the future. It's now that you can actually start making this real in your companies, whether or not you use Airtable. Thank you all, and enjoy lunch.
Thank you.